soul. You are listening to the Joyful Living Podcast. I'm Quinn Curtis, your host, and I'm so excited to be connecting with you today and especially sharing something that is really deep and near to my heart, as I feel like the 7 pieces that I'm going to be sharing with you today are truly life-changing, not only for ourselves, but really for our relationships. And so I hope that this will be really a episode that you come back to regularly or as much as you need, or that you will, really resonate with the concepts that we're sharing, because I do believe that they are foundational principles that can just change lives. So, setting it up with the premise, this past weekend, I tend to be a pretty even-tempered kind of a person, but something my husband did and said really set me off. And so I was just kind of raving, lunatic, crazy, emotional insanity point, boiling point. And I was just ranting and raving in my journal and kind of super angry towards him, right? And then I had been recognizing that ultimately over the past few weeks or so, there's been this feeling of I want to feel seen and heard. I really want to feel seen and heard more on a deeper level, right? And so if you've listened to the show before, you know that is my definition of love. It's feeling seen and heard and valued. And so there was this core desire in me of the pain would come up as I had been feeling this pain over the past even months, right? And I was processing through it and trying to figure it out. And one of the things that I was doing and trying to figure it out was running it through my logical brain. So that was the part that said, okay, you're feeling this big thing. And what exactly is it? And is it something that's really valid? And is it something that people can actually relate to? And who's the right audience for it? And, all sorts of other questions, which all that basically was saying is it was running it through a filter. And so yesterday or Sunday, when I got so upset and just flaming angry and I couldn't keep it under wraps, thank goodness I just couldn't appease that logical voice inside of me any longer. And I just kind of said, screw it. I am going to go and tell my husband how I really feel at this moment. And so bless his heart, he was sitting down and I sat down across from him and I just laid it all on the line. I just literally vomited up all of the pain, everything that I had been feeling. And his response was so loving and safe to me that it helped me see, oh my goodness, there are some crucial pieces here in how to be a safe space for ourselves and how to be a safe space for others that can grow our relationships and help us to find greater connection with each other and with our own selves, and stay out of that emotional reactivity place, which can be really unhelpful to our relationships and even really damaging. So the process that I'm going to share with you is 7 steps that you can use with other people if they are venting up big emotion in your space. Or there are 7 steps that you can also use on yourself internally. So I'm going to share them with you as if somebody else is bringing their big emotions to you, so that you're seeing, hey, okay, how do I be a safe space with somebody else's big emotions or big feelings? And then, of course, I'll be connecting the dots or helping you connect the dots as we get going, so that you can see how to then turn this around and have it work as a process for yourself as well when big feelings arise, as they inevitably do. So the first step is listen, truly listen. This is all about just simply being present and taking it seriously. Whatever it is that they're venting about, you are not, you're not saying, oh, do I have time for this? I don't know if this works, but you're just dropping it all, quieting your brain, being really present. And sometimes that requires us to put up a little bit of an emotional boundary or an energetic boundary where we say, I'm going to listen. I'm going to be with this, but that doesn't mean that I have to take it all in and be it. So a lot of times these venting of big emotional things is kind of like vomiting, right? Where if somebody was sick in front of you, then you wouldn't start eating the vomit, right? To try to make it better. Even just hearing that, I know will gross you out. But like, how often do we try to do this when somebody is sharing their big feelings with us energetically, right? And we say, oh my gosh, they're feeling so big. How do I take this from them so they stop feeling this big feeling? Okay, I'm going to just consume all the big feelings. I'm just going to take it in. I'll handle it because they can't handle it. So I'll handle it instead, right? Wrongo. That doesn't help anybody, just like it doesn't help if somebody's physically vomiting things out. So instead, you let them, you just be with it. You recognize that that's really what love does. Love is being with, right? It's not trying to fix and rush in and make it better, but just being with. Right? So that's step number one. Listen, truly listen. That's how we be with. We're present and we listen. The second step is don't make it all about you. So this is a classic flaw that a lot of us get into, myself included in the past, of where we become the victim. So this is where we start perceiving their venting as an attack. And so they're just venting and venting and venting, and we're feeling like, oh my gosh, like they're being so mean to me. And even their venting could have our name written all over it, right? You did this, you said this, you blah, 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 right? And we still have to stay really anchored in this space of this is not all about me. All these big feelings coming out, it is not all about me. And so sometimes this happens because even being the subject of the venting, we are likely still a projection of something else that's happening inside of them. And we simply set off the trigger, right? Something we did or said did set off the trigger. And so what we need to really understand when somebody comes and is venting to us is that ultimately they are feeling unsafe, right? And so in that unsafe feeling, they're coming to you to vent because they want to feel more safe with you. It's not because they're saying it's over and we're done, right? They're venting because ultimately they want to feel more safe on some level, right? And so you may be the safest person for them to vent these things out with. So instead of taking it personally, making it all about you, instead we can see, oh my goodness, like kind of crazy, but this is kind of an honor that they feel safe enough to vent and vomit all this out in front of me or with me, right? Step number 3 is don't make it not all about you. Yes, there's a paradox there with number 2 being don't make it all about you and number 3 being don't make it not all about you. And by the way, if you stay tuned at the end of the show, I'll be sharing the link in the show notes where you can actually download a little cheat sheet that has these 7 steps written on it. So if you're trying to hurriedly take notes and really capture this, know that that's coming. So that third step, don't make it not all about you, means don't turn the tables on them, pointing out their part and their flaws, which is really just your attempt to level the playing field, which still assumes that this is a personal attack. But venting is very, even if it's directed at you as a person, it's still very rarely a personal attack. It's so much like having the stomach flu. They are literally sick. Their soul has a fever and they're just vomiting it up to feel better, right? They've got to find a way to feel better, which doesn't make it right for people to attack you. So we are talking about a healthy and safe version of this, right? And if you do have somebody in your life who is continually attacking you, then this would not be describing that kind of a situation. But this is just somebody that you genuinely care about or that cares about you, or somebody that's just really venting frustration and intensity and pain, right? It's that kind of a situation. So even regardless of those situations, we should never assume that it's a personal attack and that and have it lead to defensiveness. But we can take part in recognizing that truthfully, something we did or said did trigger this response, right? It bumped into their pain somehow. And so we can take accountability for those pieces and but we don't necessarily rush into that, right? So we just kind of hold space and we don't make it all about us and we don't not make it all about us. So we're staying in a space of non-judgment. And this piece is where we get really curious about, well, what was the trigger? And we remember that the goal in this situation is to see and hear and value the other person first, and then seek constructive resolution. And this requires us to recognize that usually just sitting and hearing and being a witness to the pain is enough for it to resolve. And then there's usually only tiny refinements that are needed, which we'll talk about in the further steps. But this leads us into our next step, number 4, which is use affirming and empathetic language. So non-affirming language would look like, well, I don't know why you feel that way, or nobody else feels this way, or you should get over this already, right? That's not helpful language. You'll never, ever, ever be able to convince someone out of their pain. It's impossible. And so if you try to, all that tells them is you're not safe to me. You're not a safe space for me with this pain, and so I'm going to have to take it down deeper inside of me or take it elsewhere. So you can never convince them out of it. All we can do is stand as a witness of it, right? And so with using affirming and empathetic language, that would look like, I am so sorry. That sounds so painful. That was never my intention, and how can I make it right or better? Right? So the underlying current of the responses, of our responses when somebody is bringing these big emotions to us, should be, you matter. You matter. Right? So this doesn't mean that you necessarily have to fully understand or agree with the person venting. Their feelings may seem irrational and highly emotional, and they legitimately could be. Truthfully, emotions are that way. They aren't necessarily logical and rational and legitimate, right? So that's not what this is about anyways, is trying to prove that. That's a lost cause if we're trying to go there. And so really, if we just start to see that just because it may seem that way, it doesn't invalidate that there is pain, right? It doesn't invalidate that they have their feelings and they're feeling them. So the more that we can respond in really loving ways, the less that they will feel the need to vent and feel like that's the only way they can be heard. So ultimately, this will strengthen our relationships, because instead of having to only resort to venting, which is ultimately we're keeping our feelings buried until it's too big and then it comes out. Instead, we're able to have healthier communication all along the way, where we can just have simple refinements and adjustments happening gradually, rather than pressure for big change that comes with event, or that perceived pressure for that. So ultimately, affirming in an empathetic language looks like, I hear you, I see you, I value you. It's love, right? And so we have to remember that we don't all have to agree to get along, but we do need to respect each other's perspectives and life paths. And respect doesn't mean that we need to love and eagerly support it. We can hold a loving boundary of what we're able to do, what we're able to have in our space, but we still hold healthy respect for their path, their process, their feelings being real. The 5th step is to ask questions for better understanding. This is one of the ones that is the most surprising in why in our psyches are we so afraid of asking questions, right? Questions lead to clarity. They lead to the breakthrough. So why are we so afraid of that? So when somebody's coming to us venting, rather than assuming we know what they mean and trying to reach resolution as quickly as possible, right? Just take care of it, just fix it. We want to seek to understand how they feel so deeply that we could even restate it back to them if needed. Saying something like, so what I hear you're saying is blank. Is that what you're meaning? Right? When we ask questions, it shows that we're trying to understand, which creates safety in their space, right? But if we're coming from a defensive space, the temptation will be to ask questions in order to build evidence against them and to try to prove that their feelings aren't valid and to try to prove our own innocence. So this is still viewing the venting as an attack when it really isn't usually. And so I would dare say in most situations, it really is never an attack. And so if you truly care about this person, then it's really important to lay down your own fears and insecurities about the venting. Just set it aside for the time being, and what it could mean to your relationship or what else it might could mean. Just remind yourself they feel unsafe on some level, and they're venting because they want to feel more safe, right? That's a good sign for our relationships, right? So when we lay that aside, then the venting experience and the things said don't have to significantly change our relationships, and they can actually be a source that strengthens them. They can be a piece of what strengthens them, especially as we get better at communicating, right? But this is a really crucial point to understand, that truly anything said in the venting, it just does not have to affect our relationships. We say a lot of stupid things when we are highly emotionally charged, right? We are highly irrational and illogical. It doesn't make sense. It's crazy talk when we're in that emotionally charged place. So to take anything that's being vented super, super seriously or personally would be a grave mistake, because it's not coming from a logical place. It's coming from a felt place. And the actual process of venting is a process of them trying to clarify, trying to understand, right? Sometimes we can't see what's actually happening until we vomit up all the feelings. Then we can start to see, oh, okay, this belongs here. Oh, this wasn't about them at all. Oh, this had nothing to do with this situation, but man, this hurt, right? It helps us with the sorting and the understanding and breakdown process of it for the venting piece to happen. And so it's not a part that we should be taking personally at all. But the one thing to understand is that our response to this venting is the greatest factor that will affect the relationship the most. So if we respond in a really respectful, validating, kind, objective, curious way, then our response will likely support the relationship. It will bring more safety in. But a defensive response will never strengthen the relationships. It will always create a wedge and a chasm that will be a lot harder in the future to overcome and mend. And so we want to instead hold that person in their highest self-view, see their goodness, and know their pain is very, very real to them. And there isn't a way to convince someone out of it, right? So trying to do so will show them that you just don't understand and you're not a space that is safe enough for them. And this can lead them to feel horribly misunderstood and even crazy, which honestly, from my own experience, these are major pieces that led to some mental illness kinds of symptoms where it was like, well, we don't know why you should feel that way and nobody else feels that way. So go get a pill because that must be that, maybe that'll fix it so you can feel better about these things that are happening, instead of just allowing me to feel what I was feeling and not having to make it right or wrong or socially acceptable, right? And so, so then the sixth piece, an understanding that our responses are all about, before I give the sixth piece, our responses are all about helping them feel more safe. Right? With every bit of our response, that's our goal. How can I help you feel more safe, right? And we see that we cannot put out their fire with fire. We can't fight fire with fire, right? So that would be futile. So the sixth piece is that we seek peaceful resolution by asking, how can I help make this better? And usually a really constructive way of doing this is, what are the 1 to 2 things that I could do that could help make this better? Now, this is very intentional language. You'll see that I'm not saying, how can I make this better? Which would mean that it's your responsibility to fix how they're feeling and make it all right and make the sunshine again and the rainbows come out. No. It's their responsibility to ultimately help themselves feel better, but we can be a support to that, right? So how can we help? What are the things that we can do? What are the triggers we can avoid? What are the steps we can take to make things shift and help them feel a little bit less unsafe? When we don't ask this question of what can I do? then it leads us to instead walk on eggshells with that person, where instead this creates way more distance and less safety, because truly we're just trying to avoid another outburst, which is a really passive aggressive response to this, which is super unhelpful, right? And so if we simply just say, hey, what could I do? What are the 1 to 2 things that I could do that could make this better? We'll see that so often, 9 times out of 10, it's simple refinements. It's things like, well, let's not talk about this on Sunday dinners. When we're with my friends, could we avoid this subject, right? When you're talking about my body, could you avoid these words, right? It's usually those simple refinements that make all of the difference. By small and simple means, great things come to pass. And we'll see that even if it was a big, ugly, intense event, that still those small and simple means can be what makes the difference in resolution. And so sometimes they may give us a really irrational response still if they're still in a lot of emotion. And they may say something that we cannot agree to and we can't give or do. And so in those situations, then that could be a good opportunity to say, I'm not sure that I can do that, but could we try me doing this? Would that help? Right? And we get curious and we ask around and see what questions. And then we walk away from the conversation with clarity to really just focus on the top 1 to 2 things. Let all the venting go. Let everything that was said go. Let all the other pieces that we might assume that they might need or want, we let that go too. And we just stay focused on those 1 to 2 things and don't let it continue to haunt us. It's just like if somebody physically vomits, we don't hang on to the vomit and wonder what it means and sift through it and wonder if we should, gross, right? I won't even take that analogy further. So gross, but we do that all the time with emotional vomiting. And so just throw it out, just let it go, flush it down the toilet, focus on the 1 or 2 things that are going to help and move forward. And then that leads us to the 7th piece, which is demonstrate your ability to be a safe space by seeking more closeness afterwards. Even if they've asked for more space, let that be your clear intention that you desire more closeness. You desire to be closer to them, which involves you having to be in a space where you're very, very respectful and patient of their healing process, and them continuing to process and figuring things out, and that you're ultimately holding on to love super tight moving forward. Now, sometimes with the question of, well, what are the couple of things that I could do to help make this right? Sometimes that will open the door that they could say, well, help me figure this out. And then we could start bringing in fixing, right? And making it right. Then we have earned the right to give feedback and to give direction and clarity, but only when it's asked for and invited. And usually we need to have stood as a witness of their pain before we will have the right to be able to offer any kind of refinements or adjustments that we see could be helpful. And so we really have to wait and earn that right. So if we're looking at this process from our own situation, right, and walking through these steps, this would look like a big feeling comes up in you, right? Big stressor. And so instead of shoving it out, then we listen, we truly listen. One of my dear close friends had a big bout of shame come up. She just kept saying, I just keep feeling so embarrassed. I feel so embarrassed, right? So much shame. And her logical brain kept wanting to just shut that down. Like, we shouldn't feel shame and we should move on and this is not worth it, right? But really, to be a safe space for herself, it required her to be present with the feeling and allow herself to feel it. I feel shame. This is what is real. I'm going to be present with it. I'm not going to hurry and rush it away. I'm going to be with it. And then the second step, don't make it all about you. Don't take it all personally, right? How often do we do this? Is where big feelings are coming up and we find ourselves saying things like, well, I'm just a mess. Well, I'm just lazy. Well, I'm just not worth it. Well, I'm just forgettable, right? We say all sorts of horrible things. That would be taking it personally instead of, well, I just feel really tired lately. I feel a little lazy, right? We don't have to take it personally, and don't make it all about us, right? The third piece, don't make it not all about us. When we're looking at these big emotions that are coming up from us, this is really important to not take us into victim mode where the world is going against us and everything's a problem and everything's wrong. Instead, we say, I will take accountability for the parts of this that are mine, right? And we let the rest go. Number 4, with using affirming and empathetic language, this is where we really shift into a gear with ourselves where we're starting to be very kind and compassionate with our responses to our feelings. And we can say things like, that really hurt when that happened. When they said that, that really felt bad, right? We can be empathetic and compassionate with ourselves. And then asking questions for better understanding. How often do we have a big feeling show up and we don't ask any questions and we just try to bury that big feeling, or we go and grab food, or we go and grab alcohol, or whatever it might be to try to just drown it out, instead of asking curious, objective questions like, shame is coming up. Shame is here. I can feel it. I can see it. Why is it here? Why do I feel this way? It's not because I'm a loser. It's because that's not true ever. In the reality of human history, no one is officially a loser. There's always goodness within all of us. There's something beautiful and meaningful and true, right? And so ask questions, right? Like, well, why am I feeling this way? Well, I'm feeling this way because, when somebody does something like this, it makes me feel like I don't matter. It makes me feel like I'm not worth it. Right? Well, is that true? Well, no, I am worth it. I do matter. Okay, are we ready to let go of the pain, right? Continuing to ask those questions rather than just trying to move on or stuff it down. And then looking at seeking peaceful resolution by asking, how can I help make this better? What are the top 1 to 2 things? And really asking that of ourselves and saying, there's this big feeling. What are the top 1 to 2 things that I can do to help shift this and help myself feel better, help make it right? And here again, we'll usually see it small shifts like, I need to exercise a little bit more. That's going to really help me feel better. Or, I haven't been drinking a lot of water, or I could really use some meditation time in my day, right? Just little refinements, and we'll find those pieces starting to feel better as a result. And then the 7th piece, demonstrating your ability to be a safe space by seeking more closeness afterwards when we're working with the situation with ourselves. This is a space where we continue to offer gentleness and kindness with ourselves as we continue to heal and work through our own process in our lives. Excited for you guys to feel into that and try this. This was life-changing in my world as I recognized, oh my gosh, all of my deepest pain and intensity comes from a space of not having this need met, of not feeling a space safe enough where I could just vomit the pain out. I could really say how I could feel, and there wasn't a person that was safe enough in my world at that time that could hold me through it and could hear me and say, oh my gosh, Quinn, that hurts. That is so painful. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I see you. This doesn't define you. This isn't who you are. And this hurts. And what can we do to make it right? How can we help make it better? Right? And I would wager that many of you listening to this show have had many experiences like that as well. It is my opinion that we're living in a sick world where there is so much undigested pain and just sickness inside of us from unresolved pain that needs to come up. It needs to be let out and vomited out. And it doesn't get better by repressing it. Repressing it just continues us staying in this pain cycle where we continue passing on the pain. And honestly, staying in the pain cycle and not being a safe space for yourself is what's made it so hard for you to not perceive other people venting as a personal attack on you, your character, disrespecting, whatever it might be. But as we start to reframe our perspective on this, I really feel like this is what changes our lives. When we can be a safe space for ourselves in this way, then we can offer that same safety to the people in our lives who matter the most to us, which then allows us to offer this safety to our communities, to our businesses, to the people that we connect with. And through that sense of safety, we're all going to be able to get better. We're going to be able to heal from the pain and the trauma that has happened through our lives. And we're going to be able to return to love. So that's my prayer and my hope as you listen to this, that you will commit to be a safe space for yourself, first and foremost, so that you can in turn be a safe space to those around you and help stop the pain cycle. And in the show notes and on my blog, you'll find a free download with these 7 steps listed. And if this show and these 7 steps can be of support to anybody in your life, please share this episode and let's make a difference with this knowledge. Let's bring more healing to this planet and make this world a safer space to be in by sharing these principles and living them, and really trusting that love is enough. Love is what matters. That feeling seen and heard and valued changes us. It changes us. It changes lives. It's what makes things right. And it amazes me how often this really is the answer. And it's so simple, right? It seems so simple, but love really is the answer. People feeling seen and heard and valued. That takes away the pain, right? And when we're not in pain, we can make healthier choices. We can be kinder. We are naturally more full of love. We can show up and serve. We can sacrifice when needed. We can be stronger. We can be courageous. But it all starts with love. So my hope and prayer is that this has been of service to you today and in your life. And I am so grateful for your listening ear, and I'm sending you so much love in your path and your process, and praying that if there is no safe space for you, or you don't feel there is a safe space for you in your outer world of people, please start being a safe space for yourself at minimum, right? Start hearing and seeing and valuing your own self first. This is how we stop the pain. Because in my own experience, there are very few people in my world that can truly be a deep, safe space for me, even with my world and the expanded network I have and the amazing people in my life. Like, it is no small thing to be a safe space for someone, but this is what we need to create for ourselves first, and then create with other people. And so please create that first for yourself. If you're looking for more support with that, or more ideas, and you'd like us to talk about this more, please reach out. And I'm happy to serve and support however I can in this effort, and pray that it makes a difference in your life and in the lives of those that you love. And sending you so much love. Bye for now. And in the end, only love will last.
You've been listening to Joyful Living. If you haven't already done so, be sure to email me at quinn@joyfullivingmovement.com so I can send you our yummy Joyful Living welcome package filled with lots of awesomeness, including access to our private Joyful Living network. I read every email from my listeners and would love to hear from you. Also, be sure to leave a review on iTunes, and most importantly, have a joy-filled day.